4.3 out of 5. Cinematography. That Last of Us compared to Game of Thrones, the way to make a TV show feel immersive in a sci-fi fantasy world, either straight up medieval fantasy or a post-apocalyptic setting, the way to make TV immersive is with wide shots and detailed sets that you show off. That this is how cinematography makes you feel like you're there. They have wide shots depicting the whole world. And Last of Us did this very effectively, that they'd have a huge vista of the ruins of Boston outside the quarantine zone, or an active military checkpoint within the QZ and it's inhabited, but there's a lot of set dressing with paperwork and posters and stuff and aging, that the detail was thought out. Not necessarily a big vista, something like a big vista of a ruined city, or a checkpoint that's got a lot of paperwork in it and just it looks worn and real. Other things that really impressed me were like a wide shot of a highway full of wrecked cars leading up to a tunnel entrance they had to go through to get into a city, but it was clogged, and just you see the scale of the devastation. What Game of Thrones did was pander the lead actors for Emmy Awards with tight close-ups, so you'd have bizarre scenes that don't just briefly intercut to show their reaction shots, then back to the landscape or the monster they're looking at. The face shot isn't a reaction, but the point of the scene, to get awards, and it destroyed the storytelling. We call this the these performances, these faces thing, because that's how, it was like a meme that Benioff drilled into people whenever they questioned this on set. We heard more than one director in different commentary tracks saying, well, why are we focusing on this character so much? Well, when you have these performances and these faces, you need to show them off. And just pay attention to that keyword, faces. Anytime Benioff is in the commentary, he's not talking about plot, he's talking about, oh man, these faces look amazing, with no dialogue, just the emoting, because that's what he thinks showing them off is. And we later found out, after the failed pilot, the pilot that Last of Us Craig Mazin said was incoherent to him, massive problem, HBO itself told him, we found this from the behind-the-scenes book after the show ended, you wasted millions of dollars on the pilot because there's no wide shots in it. From the way they described it, it was the same thing. It's just a bunch of close-ups on actor faces. So why did we bother building expensive sets that you never filmed? Or going to expensive location shoots that instead of looking at the mountains and stuff you were in, it was all focused on the actor. That, not my opinion, head of HBO yelled at them, we could have filmed this in a parking lot. That you didn't know how to use and show off all of the expensive things that we put into this, you idiot. And so it was weird when people were like, by season 7, the really hardcore drank the Kool-Aid crowd were saying, I feel like I'm in Westeros, when no, these are like very tight close-ups of Kit Harington's face that are actually doing a bad job of showing off the set he's in. And they purely from a logistic, not artistic standpoint, they wasted money on that. I mean, a lot. There was a point where they had an outside director, a horror movie director, Neil Marshall, when he came in to do the Night's Watch battle in season 4, at the finale of season 4, the Battle of Castle Black. He said, because before he'd done Blackwater, now he was up at the wall, and when he went to the wall set for Castle Black, he said, this is a 360-degree, fully realized set, and no one would know because you've never had the camera following people around from one room to the next, or that it's this weird seeing good cinematography for once. He had this great 360-degree rotating shot of the whole castle to show people are fighting everywhere in it. That, yeah, up to that point, I didn't realize they built a full set for this that wasn't just one room in one soundstage, one room in another soundstage, but it's a fully realized castle, both exteriors and interiors. Things like that this doesn't feel like I am in Westeros when it's these needlessly tight close-ups on Peter Dinklage's face. The things they said in the Last Watch documentary, which I have clips of on the front of my channel, that we spent 7 months building this fully realized King's Landing street set that we barely used. That they built a fully realized Winterfell for Season 8 with rooms they never went into. Benioff and Weiss didn't even know that clothes need to be aged. You know, breaking it, the breakers, that it doesn't look like it's new and off the rack. And they've joked about this. They joked about this at Austin Film Fest. That, we thought a costume department needed literally one person. We didn't know it takes 100 people, not just producers, but there's an entire department of a dozen people who just make the leather look aged. And this is part of general television and stuff. Imagine if Joel and Ellie's clothes in The Last of Us looked new off the rack when it's a post-apocalyptic show set 20 years after most of civilization collapsed. That they didn't know Night's Watch gear needs to look worn and lived in. So just this whole thing with cinematography, that they didn't understand visual storytelling and how to make it feel immersive through the camera work or showing off the set design. And other things have done this, like Ridley Scott's Alien again, that they show off that the set is dirty and grimy. It's part of the world, the visual world building. Actually, come to think of it, another horror movie that springs to mind that did this well in terms of camera work is 28 Days Later. We, again, also technically not zombies, but those haunting shots of Cillian Murphy wandering through completely empty main street squares in London. Or the one shot that really struck with me that made it feel immersive as if I was there. The paradox of that wide shots make it feel immersive is when him and the other survivors are driving up the main highway from London to Manchester. And it's this big, multi-lane highway, and slowly on the horizon, they realize that Manchester is burning, that the entire city is on fire because there's no firefighters to put it out. That for miles in each direction, as far as they can see, as they crest a hill, from left to right across their entire field of vision, all of Manchester is on fire. Like from one side of the screen to the next, and it slowly creeps into our field of view as it creeps into theirs to represent the scale of the devastation. Any run-of-the-mill cable TV show can depict a city on fire. You add some flames and stuff. It's the artistry of there was this slow panning shot, and that it was across the entire horizon line, and you could not see the edge. And it wasn't playing off of their reaction that, well, it starts pointed at them and you wonder what are they looking at, and then the camera turns and you go outside of the car and the camera slowly pulls up and you see that there's fire from across the entire horizon line. That is a stunning, horrifying shot of the scale of the devastation. And The Last of Us would use wide shots to give that sense of immersion. Not just ruined cityscapes, but just the isolation of Joel and Ellie's trip through the wilderness. Just they're in a not particularly devastated part of a forest or something. Or even when they're not around wrecked cars, or like they're going through the Great Plains, and it just shows at this part in their journey, they're going along one of those highways in the Great Plains where there's not a town from one horizon line to the next. And you just see the isolation of that. Or like that episode where they're on foot for a time, and in a field in the background you see a crashed airplane. And then they start talking about, oh wow, I've never been in a plane before. That gives you a sense of being in the world. That instead of a bunch of tight close-ups on Ellie, there's a wide shot and they see a plane and you hear them talking about, I've never been in a plane. And you just realize the scale of the devastation. So Game of Thrones was horribly filmed because they were trying to pander to the actors. We need to have the faces, we need to have the faces. And just watching The Last of Us, I was so impressed that Mason is the person who criticized them for this after the pilot. Their alleged friend, who they Benioff and Weiss have made it a point of being known by the well-known. That you hear that they socialize with so many other major people who are directors and filmmakers when they themselves don't really have much to their name other than Game of Thrones. And in terms of, tell me in the comments, what does it mean for something to be immersive when the camera is a few inches off of Peter Dinklage's face all the time, or actually showing landscapes the way that The Last of Us would show the world in wide shot, or pointing the camera away from the damn actors and at the really good set dressing to show a lot of detail went into this world. Oh, and before I move on, it should go without saying, as a corollary to cinematography, have wide shots don't just point at the actors' faces, Last of Us actually knew how to film an action scene in darkness at night. That these guys, the Game of Thrones guys, did not know how basic camera work functions. That episode 5 of The Last of Us is the big battle against the infected of the whole season. There's a horde of them that pops out from underground, and it takes place at night, but there's an entire building that was set on fire, which is the obvious light source for the whole scene. Instead, for Game of Thrones, it's bizarre when you hear secondhand how people in the commentaries were talking about how they went about this, and Sapochnik bitter about it, and just apparently they would insist to people, no, it is a night scene. That means it happens in darkness. And on a scale of months, directors, cinematographers, and VFX people were telling them, you won't be able to see anything. You won't even see the actors' faces that much. And apparently they just got it in their heads that this impresses people. When, on a scale of months, people were even showing them, there's this thing where you have concept art of the lighting levels, and it looks pitch black, this concept art of the lighting levels, where people were warning them well ahead of time. Everyone knew this would be a disaster. It isn't, oh, adjust your TV. Everyone who worked on this knew what they asked was insane. Well, not the cast and crew, because they weren't behind the camera, but anyone in a position like the VFX team in particular. One of the things we found out from the Blu-ray commentaries is they didn't just film in darkness. They ordered the VFX team to spend millions of dollars on Dragon VFX and Battle VFX, which they would subsequently darken. When the VFX guy was desperately trying to tell him, can't I just make cheaper CGI at lower quality for this one shot where it's not going to be visible at this light level anyway? Literally the only people who will see the amount of detail that went into it are the VFX team themselves. This will never be on screen. Much like how they had, like, the Winterfell fully realized set that there's like a bakery and a brewery, functional bakery, that they knew the camera would never go inside. Then why did you build it? It doesn't exist on camera. That the VFX guy was telling him, this is so dark, Melisandre just looks like a disembodied face floating in the darkness because her robes are dark. You need to brighten it. And they said, no, it is dark. And it's just, these are career experts in film. They're telling them, you need to think of a light source. I refuse. Like, have them set their trench fires that are lighting it, because the whites are vulnerable to fire. They didn't want to do that. House of the Dragon has competent people running it now that, episode 4, they had this big scene where Rhaenyra and Daemon sneak out at night. And in the interviews, behind the scenes things, the cinematographer is explaining, we had to think up what are light sources in this medieval city at night, and we thought up there's a street fair going on with like people juggling fire sticks or something, or bonfires, something as a justification for the normal light levels that you'd have on a city street, that we can at least see where Rhaenyra and Daemon are. It's dim, but we can see them. But he explained, I had to think out, there's a fire here so we can see everything. Versus Game of Thrones, when the VFX team and directors were begging them, they can't claim ignorance, there are no light sources, you will not be able to see anything. And they were going, well, of course, because it's night, it's a night battle, it's supposed to be dark. Then why are we building all of this? This is just a short corollary to you have no idea how cinematography works, whereas The Last of Us actually look at the effort and patience and attention that went into that night battle in episode 5. Not just the spectacle, but that this is the one time we're pulling the veil off and showing a horde of these things. Had more impact. That there is a light source, that a building is on fire so you can see what's going on, and that it pulls back in wide shots to show the scale of the battle in a few scenes, that it isn't just Ellie's face, but you can tell there's a geography and pacing to what's going on. All of that, of course, ties together.